We're very excited tonight to share with you this integrated lesson plan. We've got lots of wonderful examples, and I'm happy to say you're going to have time in breakout rooms tonight to get to look at some examples and actually work through one of your own. So we're grateful for the time. I want to give a shout out to, I know you guys just are working on, you just finished your session 1 training for Ci3T, so congrats to you, and thanks for being here from the West Coast. So excited to see all these wonderful faces and all this success. You do not have to have Ci3T in place in your district, in your building, to be able to do integrated lesson planning, but it sure is nice when you do, because it gives you a little bit of a platform on knowing how to pull in those expectations. So first, can everybody give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen comfortably? Okay, wonderful. So if you are here for the first time tonight as a first-time user, be sure that you do register on this tab that is where the modules are located. You don't need to access anything in there tonight in order to enjoy our company and time together, but I want to show you where all this is so that you can have access to the resources that you need to take this back to your school, to your district, to your state. We are grateful for opportunity to just have this dedicated time to dig a little bit deeper. And if you have already registered one time, do not register again, because it will literally lock you out, and then we will help you get back into it. So, but if you've already registered, just go ahead and stay with that for the one time. So many of you are here and you're familiar with Ci3T, and some of you are running your own training. The intent behind Ci3T, people ask us all the time, like, what is the difference between Ci3T and MTSS? And what I tell people all the time, and I think Wendy and I have written this in about 100 articles, is that we view it as a broadening of traditional multi-tiered systems of support. So back in the day when it was first getting started, people used to build systems that first started with reading, and then the next year they would revise their system to add in math, and then the third year they'd add in behavior. And what we can tell you is that meant that we were resetting the system 3 consecutive years. So in Ci3T, you're putting all those pieces together into one integrated system so that when you're welcoming students from preschool to high school into your school, into your district, into your county, into your state, we are prepared to meet their multiple needs, and we do so in a way that empowers educators to work within a system that also takes care of their well-being. Wendy Oakes has led, who's here tonight, has led a series of studies all about teacher well-being, and she has learned and has shared with the field that not only is that true at the elementary level, that teachers feel well, the same is true for the middle and high school level. So what we're sharing with you tonight, these pieces of working in an integrated tier 1, when you start to think about this, you might be thinking, dang, this feels like a lot, and I'm not sure I could really ask adults to do this. I don't think you can afford not to ask adults to do this, because we know that when teachers do this, they report lower burnout rates than the national average, not on every domain. Like, people are still pretty emotionally exhausted, but they're less likely to depersonalize from their students. They have a greater sense of personal accomplishment. They also report having a greater sense of efficacy in their teaching. And those are things we want, especially as we've welcomed so many new educators into the field. So when you're thinking about the work that we're doing tonight in integrated lesson planning, this is going to pull together all these pieces and make it come to life in a classroom. So when you look at your own Ci3T implementation manual, if you have one, or if you're just conceptually thinking about it right now, or if you're in the process of building those out, you've got clarities on what you want to teach at tier 1. So you've got the content that is directed by state and local laws. Many of you have embraced principles like low intensity strategies. I don't see the words behavior specific praise without thinking about Carrie Brandon, because I know that's her jam. Many of you have expertise in visible learning and universal design for learning. Those are all things that go into that academic domain. And then at the core of this is positive behavior intervention and support. And in every single building where Ci3T is implemented, every single adult has the opportunity to weigh in on what they think kids need to know to be successful. And it's not a guess, it's a data-informed approach. So we actually have a survey, and that survey goes out to every adult in the building on what they think kids need to know to be successful in classrooms, in hallways, in cafeterias, in restrooms, and arrivals and dismissals. And so, like, I know when Tammy Becker used to be an elementary principal, every person in her building had the opportunity to weigh in what they thought was key skills. And then those data were used by Tammy and her team to make decisions about what's going to go into that matrix. The other big piece of it is bringing in validated resources into your building so that you can explicitly teach well-being skills for kids. So if you're focused on becoming self-determined lifelong learners, some of those skill sets that you might be prioritizing are teaching kids self-awareness, how to self-regulate, how to resolve conflicts, how to make their needs known in a respectful way. And so those resources, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So I know as they're exploring that within their district, they're going to want to make sure that they look to see where the evidence is and make sure that things that are practical, they can be well validated with like communities, and that becomes the base. So when we're talking today about how to do integrated lesson planning, in the backdrop, if this is in place, we have all those clarities, and they're communicated to students and faculty and staff. They're communicated to families, and they're communicated to the administrators. So when we think about Ci3T, it is a tall order, but it's the gift of clarity and communication amongst all people that are committed to supporting students. So when you think about the bank of resources that now exists, thanks to the Institute of Education Sciences and the work that's come behind it, tonight we're talking about creating clarities of what this looks like instructionally in classrooms. And this is something that people ask us all the time. What does Ci3T, when implemented well, look like instructionally in a classroom? Tonight, we're going to make that transparent for you. So if he's here tonight thinking like, tell me more about what this means and how does that get done and what's the practicalities of it, tonight's the night to do that. And I want to be very clear, even with all that in place, I guarantee you, no matter how awesome it is with implementation, there will be some students that need more than Tier 1 has to offer. And I often say it is not a tragedy when there are kids that could benefit from Tier 2 or from Tier 3. It is an expectation. There's going to be kids that need more because different kids have different acquisition deficits, like skill sets that have not yet been taught. And there's some, and actually more, kids that have performance, not skill deficits, but performance deficits, meaning they know how to do it, but they're just not doing it yet. Many of us here have probably read about good sleep time routines, and you probably all know it's a good idea to avoid screen time. It's a good idea to do quieter activities, to not have blue light in your room and that type of thing. But how many of you, in all honesty, are doom scrolling on your phone right before bedtime? Anybody? Thank you. And how many of you do that little, I'll just see what my bank account balance is right before you go to bed, or I'll check that last email? That's right. So those are all things that are not part of the program, but we do it. And you don't have to raise your hand for this part. We also know that, having any kind of alcoholic beverage 4 to 5 hours before you go to sleep is also not a great idea. Nobody needs to put this in the chat, but many of us do have that enjoyment before we hit the hay. So just because we know what to do doesn't mean it's always in place. So we want to make sure we've got plans in place. The other thing we want to make sure that people are aware of is that Tier 1 is not a pray and hope model, although prayer is great. We want to make sure, though, that we have data for people to give input on what they think about what the plans are and what is their views on the goals, the procedures, and the outcomes. That's why social validity is taking place, where every adult gets an opportunity to weigh in. And that is why we ask people, what are you doing for implementation? Like, what are you teaching? How are you using your reinforcers? How are you using data? So if we're going to engage in this data-informed model, and I want you to hear this, your schools built this using research. So they went to the research, they gathered information, they gathered data. So they pulled in research, they pulled in data, and together, those things came together to build out Ci3T. It is not a crapshoot as to who gets what. Science is driving the decision making there, but we can't just assume it's going to take place flawlessly. So one of the things that we've had the gift of learning with many, many people from literally 6 different districts over the course of 6.5 years now is people have been very transparent about what they said they need more of to be able to do this well. And now many of those modules are featured here. So tonight you are here, and we're grateful to you for being here. You don't have to be in a school Ci3T system, but we'd love for you to know what that backdrop is. And this idea of integrated lesson planning that we're going to talk about tonight, it is a hallmark characteristic of what's happening in Ci3T systems. And it's a way for teachers, and we're not suggesting that everybody has to use this lesson plan format that we're going to show you tonight to fill this out for every lesson. But Wendy and Katie Pelton and Mark Buckman and I years ago thought, hey, this would be a good idea to make this more explicit, to make it more transparent. So our 3 objectives for today are going to be to describe the key features of integrated lesson plans, And then we're really going to take some time to focus on getting clarity on the objectives. Like, what are you trying to accomplish academically, behaviorally, and socially? And then all the years of learning about low intensity strategies like behavior specific praise, instructional choice, instructional feedback, pre-correction, active supervision, high probability requests. Today we're going to show you how to use it. And if anybody is starting to use the new tiered fidelity inventory, we want to make this explicit connection for you so that if you are in a school system where you're using the TFI, this is very much a part of Tier 1 efforts, and this is actually item 1.10. So if you are somebody that's heading down the road, getting ready to do that, like I know she is a district leader, and she's got lots of schools that are probably completing this right now, great reminder for them that as they do this, it's building towards that. So thank you for letting us welcome to you tonight and give you a little backdrop about where we're situating this work at Tier 1. And now if you could pop onto our website, and if you would like to, go to this tab, ci3t.org/pl. And thank you so much, Elise, for popping that in the chat. If you go there and scroll down, you're going to find a set of blue accordions like the ones you see here. And if you could pop open the one that says Ci3T in Action, Integrated Lesson Plans. Now that you have found that, and we're going to make some module connections for you, and as the prep has been done, Elise has done a beautiful job of making sure that in the top right-hand corner, when something is in a module, it'll give you a little picture so you can go to find it later. Because we are learning we need breadcrumbs to go find these wonderful things. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the key features of the integrated lesson plan. So it's just going to be giving you an explicit look of what those core features are. And then we're going to talk through actually how to build it out. So let's jump in. So when we think about integrated lesson planning, this is, in the perfect world, something that every teacher would know how to do. People that provide instruction for students would get an overview of what this is. This is not something that we are recommending that people require teachers to turn in for every lesson. The idea would be to use this as a conceptual tool. I will tell you that I have met some teachers recently who generally do this for big important lessons, like when they're running a lab or they're launching a literacy unit or they're doing something where they want to create some clarities for themselves. And what I share with them is if they're doing that for the big things, keep track of that. And even if you committed to doing one lesson a day or one lesson a week, over time you can build out a wonderful professional learning library that would bring these to life. This is the top part of the lesson plan. So at the top of it, you would have date, class, and the unit that you're working on, the topic, and then alignment with district and state standards. On the left-hand side, you see 3 objectives. So raise your hand if you have your screen on, if you have ever provided instruction as a teacher to preschool, elementary, middle, or high school. Okay, I'm watching people nod their heads and raise their hand. Thank you so much. So you know how we were all taught to tell kids what we expect them to learn academically? We say, like, today we are going to be talking about the 3 main causes of the Civil War. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between metaphors and similes. Today we're going to talk about the laws of gravity. So you're telling kids up front the topic and what you want them to walk away with. Like today, I want you to learn a little bit about how to subtract across 0. So like how to bring those 10 little eggs over with you when you get to the next column. That is great. In addition to that, we are also encouraging you to use this as an opportunity to let kids know that those lessons you've been teaching them, like through your Character Strong, your second step, whatever your validated resources, the things that we're teaching kids, like how to show empathy, how to resolve conflict, we're telling them up front, this is a chance for you to practice. We had an opportunity to go to one of our district partner schools a couple weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago, although it feels like 2 months. But we went and we got to go into this classroom. So we were there doing some professional learning. We asked to see a building. We walked into a first grade classroom, Allie B? Or is it second?
I think it was kindergarten, actually.
Oh my gosh, it was? Okay. Hand to God, this is a true story. All right. We walk in and this teacher's getting them ready to go back to their desk. So their buns are on the floor. And the question from the teacher to the group was, they were all sitting on the carpet, and she said, all right, what are we going to do if we see that a friend is having a really hard time when they're supposed to be getting started with this? And a little boy raised his hand, waited to be called on, and the words out of his mouth, no joke, were, we're going to show some empathy. And then he went on to explain what that meant. It was like I know exactly. It was like a heartwarming moment. Like I know when I wanted to run up and hug that teacher. She just did such a great job. And it wasn't a planned visit. It wasn't like somebody shaved their legs and had an evaluation dress on. It was just like real life happening in a classroom. It was a thing of beauty. So this is an opportunity to actually explain to kids, here's a practice opportunity. Today you're going to hear some ideas that might be super different than your own. And so what's some ways that we're going to listen to ideas with, making sure that we're staying calm, but listening to somebody else's ideas. The third set of objectives is to make sure that we're stating the behavioral expectations. We should not assume that kids know how to use the materials or how to make the transitions from, this place to this place, or how you want them to do things unless we teach them. So we are going to, just like you've taught setting expectations throughout the year, just like you've taught those lessons, we're going to let kids know what we're looking for. So like today, when you get to your table, before you get started, we're going to make sure that the basket's on our table, that we've got our glue sticks, we've got our sparkly markers, we've got our crayons, and we're going to make sure that everybody gets a chance to pick the writing utensil that they want to use before we all get started. So I'm pre-correcting that for them. Does that make sense so far? So it's ways that you're showing kids how to be responsible there. The other part on the far right-hand side is our old friends, the low-intensity strategies. If you don't have these, if you're planning on getting a tattoo, this might be it. We want to make sure that we think about those, and it's not that you have to do every one of those in every phase of instruction, but use this as an opportunity. Like active supervision is something that I want to remind myself to do once kids get started in independent activities. Like when the groups get started, I should be up, moving around so that I can have positive interactions to acknowledge things that are happening. So I can remind kids if they get off track and do a little bit of corrective feedback. I might build in choice into the entry activity to say, there are 2 journal questions on the board before you get started. Pick 1 to write down. Or there's 6 problems on the math stations and I'd like you to pick any 3 to get started. So when you look at the full scope of the lesson plans and those different facets of instruction, like making sure you have the materials, the anticipatory set, we want to let kids know where we're hoping they're going to learn, and we want to make sure that they know we've got strategies and you've got strategies that you're going to build confidence and comfort with. And at the very end of every one of those lessons, I will say there's an opportunity for you to reflect on, like, how did I do? How did I do on, and what's my degree of comfort on like active supervision or the use of behavior-specific praise? And right now, I'm going to pause for just a moment. And we're going to watch a video of how this could come to life in a classroom. We actually have 3 videos that are resources for you to use. And so now we're going to watch one.
In this example of integrating academic, behavior, and social domains, imagine a teacher who is designing an academic lesson where students work in teams to explore measurement using fractions. The teacher set up the learning environment for students to conduct experiments using a variety of tools. Although this is primarily an academic task, the teacher stops to think about behaviors and social skills needed to successfully navigate the team activity. The teacher considers the school-wide behavior expectation matrix and the column for the classroom setting and determines 2 expectations and routines connected to them fit with this shared activity. Then the teacher considers the school-wide social skills curriculum and determines students need 5 of the previously taught social skills to engage in a successful, productive team collaboration. By integrating these into the lesson plan in advance through pre-correction, reteaching, and reinforcing, the teacher can promote behavioral expectations and social skills for students to engage in a positive, productive, safe learning environment. For more information, visit Ci3T.org.
Well done. So as you're looking at that and watching the backdrop of David thinking aloud of those different pieces, what are your initial reactions? If you have your chat open, what seems most feasible about this? Do you think it's practical to think through, like the academic, the behavior, and the social component for objectives? Do you think it's feasible to ask teachers to think about when they're going to use strategies throughout the lesson? And then also what feels challenging. So let's start with feasible. Like, what are the things you think that makes sense? Like, I can do that. Yep. Reminding people about the behavioral expectations during independent work time. And I think that's a good one because it's like it's prompted, it's in the board, and that ideally is an instructional tool. So by us putting that in lesson plan, we're reminding kids this is the thing that I'm looking for. Exactly. Thinking about those behavioral lesson or behavioral expectations. And even when we do tier 2 and tier 3 interventions in Ci3T systems, like we did a whole set of last 3 years, we've been working on recognize, relax, record to teach kids like what does their body feel like when they feel anxious? How, what are some strategies they can use? How can they self-monitor that? Every one of those lessons starts by saying, what's the expectation we want to work on today when we're in this group? Because you're right, it can thread through from tier 1 and on. Good. Taking just a quick minute, like a hot minute, just to think, what am I going to do to weave these through instruction? Because sometimes people used to think, I'm going to do the behavior stuff and then I'm going to teach. Or some people felt like I can't teach the academics until behavior's under control. Some people felt like I just have to motor through the academics and then they'll figure it out behaviorally. And respectfully, we suggest we want to provide an instructional component, right? We want to tie that all together explicitly for kids, teaching them how to be successful. And that's true for high school. That's true for middle school. It's true for elementary and even preschool. What feels potentially challenging about this to you? And if anybody wants to unmute and use their out loud words, you're welcome to do that, or you're welcome to pop it in the chat. Anything that might seem like a little bit tricky. Thinking about social skills needed in an academic lesson has been more challenging for people because that's a new thing, right? And oftentimes people will say things like, I wasn't trained as a school psychologist, or I wasn't trained as a social worker. I don't know how to do that. And that's why we have these illustrations. That's why we have these practical times to actually get into it. And that's also why we really encourage the gen ed teachers and the special ed teachers to be the people that provide the instruction of the social and emotional well-being skill sets at tier 1 so that they get even more comfortable with knowing what that content is and then realizing how they can thread that through instruction. Really nice. And it may not be an immediate shift in engagement and environment and climate, but you will build towards that because with repetition builds fluency. And as you look ahead at some of the other resources that you will find in the modules, you will see other videos, and we'll show you what a couple images of those look like. We actually have some illustrations of what it can look like in a science class and during there's one during a recreational time, and I think it's like physical education. And then we want to make sure that, we build those out over time. And someday I think it would be wonderful to get examples from live teachers. Like I honest to goodness wish we could have had a video recording of that primary grade classroom where it was just done so beautifully and so elegantly. So as we're getting started, we're going to hear from Elise next, who's going to start us through some details and thinking about how to embed those strategies into the day-to-day practicality. So if you're here today thinking about like, what could this look like instructionally? How do I actually do that tall order of pulling it all together? We're going to break it down. We will be wrapping this at the very end, or perhaps a Martha Graham interpretive dance. So be ready for that at the end. Just kidding. All right, Elise, let's take it away.
There will be no interpretive dancing for me. Okay.
Just for me. It'll be Martha Graham. There you
Not for me. All right. So in this section, we are going to think through that objectives component. So like Kathleen talked us through, when we're thinking about integrated lesson planning, this template can be like a helpful conceptual model. Some people also actually use this template. But just really thinking about what are the academic skills that I'm going after. You're probably pulling those from your state standards or the tier 1 curriculum that your school is using. Then thinking about for social skills, what are the ones that students can apply in this lesson? And a great place to look for that is your validated social skills curriculum that's being taught to all students at tier 1. And then also thinking about for behavior expectations, taking a look at your matrix and thinking about what are the behaviors that students really have an opportunity to practice in this lesson. And those are all located right there in that little box: academics, social skills, and then behavior. But when we're thinking about social skills, we're asking ourselves like 2 questions. First, just thinking, what are the social skills that kids need to engage in this lesson successfully? And then also asking ourselves, are there any opportunities to make connections to that tier 1 social skills curriculum? So another one of the videos talks through Rule of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which is one of Kathleen's favorite books, and a lesson that she actually did with kids. And if we're teaching that lesson, there's an opportunity there to make a connection to perspective taking and to make a connection to empathy. And maybe that's something that you just taught a unit about that you could then go ahead and make that connection. Even though kids maybe don't need that to be successful in the lesson, it's a natural opportunity to help kids make connections to things they've learned and kind of get some chances to practice what that looks like. So just to look at some examples of what this could look like, some social skills objectives could be around sharing materials with peers and giving them back. It could look about using like encouraging language, good try, nice work when we're working with groups, or maybe in some type of whole group scenario where people are doing some turn taking, about listening without interruption. Also thinking about what active listening might look like in your setting, if that's really important to if maybe we're doing presentations and students are getting up and presenting, what do we want the rest of the kids to be doing that shows that they're actively listening? If we're doing any type of like peer editing, something about providing like 2 positive comments and then 1 constructive suggestions. That's a really great life skill of how do I notice what's great about something? How do I give that really clear, direct feedback and highlight strengths? And how do I provide a constructive piece of feedback for something that might be an opportunity for improvement? And then thinking about when we disagree with peers, how do I use sentence starters like, I see your point, but I think blank. That can be especially important if we're doing some type of discussion or like mock debate or something where kids would need to have some skill there. And how do I navigate a situation where I see something differently? When we're thinking about these, sometimes it's helpful to start with like a broader, more general idea. So maybe if I'm getting ready to lead a lesson where there's a class discussion, I might say to myself, like, okay, I think kids need to be able to participate in this discussion. That's kind of my big idea. But then we want to narrow in. We want to get a little bit more granular and ask ourselves, what specifically does this look like? Because participating in class discussion could be about letting others question their reasoning without interrupting. Like, can a student, when they share their opinion, can they accept someone challenging that? Can they accept someone asking a question without getting defensive? That's a really important skill. Or maybe it's about using evidence-based arguments and being able to really clearly articulate, here's what I think and here's my evidence to support that. And how do I respond to peers in a way with evidence without making like a personal attack? How can I wait until my peer is done talking before I respond, that turn taking in conversation? Or maybe it's just about how do I acknowledge different viewpoints? How do I paraphrase what someone said and build on it? All of these like really granular skills that are all part of that broader umbrella of participating in a discussion. And then similarly, thinking about like, how do we navigate conflict? That's another kind of big, broad umbrella. And maybe in the lesson that you're leading, specifically what you're really looking for is for students to negotiate roles. And can they carry them out with minimal intervention? Can we resolve disagreements? Can we come up with some steps and agree on a final answer? What do we do if we have different answers? How do we decide which one to put on the sheet that's getting turned in? Can I use I statements to address concerns? If I'm working in a group and I feel like it's just not working, can I say like, hey, like I feel blank when blank because? Can I resolve disagreements by proposing a compromise? Instead of needing an adult to come in and help like navigate that for me, can I try to solve that on my own first? So when you're thinking about setting up different skills, you're thinking about maybe what's that big idea and then thinking about, okay, specifically, what could that look like in this lesson for this group of students? So with that, we're going to start with an elementary illustration. And for our middle and high school folks, I promise you one is coming for you next. But first up at elementary, we're going to pretend we're doing a lesson. It's math. And in this lesson, the teacher's going to model solving addition problems with regrouping, because that's fun, with base 10 blocks. So those like rods and cubes, I've also heard them called. So we're using manipulatives. We're modeling addition with regrouping. And then kids are going to work in pairs to solve problems, first with their manipulatives and then on paper. So if that's our lesson, our academic objective, it's about students being able to use those base 10 blocks to model and solve 2-digit addition problems with regrouping. If that's our lesson, go ahead and open up your chat. What could a social skills objective be? What are the social skills that kids would need to successfully engage in that math lesson? Go ahead and type it in the chat and let's see what ideas come to mind. Yep, collaborating with friends to solve the problems. Collaboration, definitely. Using materials as intended. Sharing, yeah. If there's one set of manipulatives that we need to share as a group, listening to the ideas, taking turns. Absolutely. So there's a lot of different skills that you could pull into this lesson. And you know your students, you know where they're at in the year, you know what you've taught already in your social skills curriculum. Maybe there's a really natural opportunity to tap into something you've taught. So like handling frustration, not agreeing. Yeah, maybe you just did a whole unit on what do I do when I'm feeling frustrated, or what do I do when I disagree? How can I have a conversation with someone if we have different ideas on what to do next? That could be a great one to tap into. Maybe you know the big challenge is going to be those manipulatives, sharing them, using them appropriately. What do I do if my peer is building with their blocks instead of using them? Instead of just calling the teacher's attention, what could I do as their partner to be helpful and supportive and remind them of the expectation? That's about like navigating that peer relationship. Awesome. So those are different ideas of what you could do to take a lesson and think about, okay, what are the natural opportunities here where kids either need a social skill in order to successfully engage, or what's an opportunity that I could remind students of something we've already learned in our Tier 1 curriculum, our Tier 1 social skills curriculum, that they could practice. So once we've done that, then we want to think about, okay, what's our behavioral expectation or expectations that we want to focus on? So you're going to look at your matrix and you're going to think about what are some of the behaviors that are on our matrix that kids have an opportunity to demonstrate during this lesson. And that could be like maybe using digital tools and online platforms responsibly if we have our computers out. Maybe it's about listening when a teacher or a peer is talking. It could be about arriving on time. I know this was really big when I worked in a middle school, like being on time and having all your materials. Like, no, you cannot just go to your locker. We literally just started class. You were literally just in the hallway. That was really important. Like, I need you to come in and I need you to be ready and have all the things you need. It could be about keeping our bodies to ourselves, raising our hand if we need help, making sure kids really know, what do you do if you're stuck? How can I get my teacher's attention? And maybe it has to do about staying in our own designated areas during instruction. So let's think about this for middle or high school. If we're in a lesson where we're going to be reading a short story, and then students are going to work in pairs and they're going to brainstorm possible themes or evidence, themes and evidence. So what's the theme of the story and what's my evidence to support that? And then we're going to have a structured discussion where we're going to practice how do we connect ideas and support those claims with text evidence. So our objective is we're going to identify the theme of a short story and cite 2 pieces of textual evidence to support that claim. So if this is our lesson, what are some of the behaviors that students might have an opportunity to demonstrate? And it might be large on your screen, it might be small, but there are some ideas on here, but please feel free to pull from your experience, pull from the expectations in your rooms. But if you think about middle and high schoolers engaging in this lesson, what are some behavioral expectations that feel relevant for this lesson? Yeah, what do I do if I have a question? What does active engagement look like? Definitely. Staying engaged, yep. Willing to help. Yeah, what do I do if I finish early? How can I be a helpful peer in this situation? Staying focused. This might be maybe a long activity. Maybe reading and working with my partner takes 20 minutes. How do I stay engaged? How do I stay focused while other people are talking? Maybe active listening, if that's a thing that's important or you've been working on. Kind words, listen to peers. Yeah, someone might share something that's wrong and we're not going to be like making fun of them or making comments or laughing. That wouldn't be a helpful, productive experience for our room. Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, so those are some examples of what that could look like. So what we're getting ready to do now is have some time to practice applying this to your context. So just to make sure you're set up for success, the handout for today is on our website. It's at ci3t.org/pl. Or you go to ci3t.org and you hit this professional learning tab. And then you're going to scroll down until you get to these pretty blue accordions. And we're in this one right here. Ci3T in action, integrated lesson planning for enhanced instruction. And what you'll find there is the slide deck for today. So if you want this PowerPoint, it's there for you. The agenda's there, and as well as the pacing guide for if you wanted to take this session and present it at your school. We have kind of some suggested pacing there. And then underneath in bold, it'll say handouts, and there's the Ci3T integrated lesson plan. And we're going to invite you to download that. And then you're going to have time in a breakout room. And what you'll do is open up an upcoming lesson plan, or if you don't have a lesson plan, because maybe you're not in a classroom setting, you could think about the lessons we just talked through. And then you're going to ask yourself, okay, what's one social skills objective I could write for this lesson? And then what's one behavioral objective I could write for this lesson?
This next segment is going to be brought to us by Donna Colley. And I just want to brag on Donna for just a second before she gets started. I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was now. Donna, I want to say 12 13, 14,
Yes.
15, something like,
Probably 12 or 13.
yeah, so a long, long time ago. Wendy and I got to work with Donna when her district decided to implement Ci3T. So we got to fly out there in Vermont. We got to work with Donna as when she was principal leading a team. And she's done Ci3T for a number of years. She has since retired and is now a Ci3T coach. So this is a wonderful moment for us to have her here today. So you're getting ready to learn from another wonderful implementer. So let's hear it, Donna.
Thank you. That was really nice of you. Thank you so much. But I love this work, as I have shared before. So incorporating low intensity strategies to increase engagement. You had an opportunity in your last breakout room to do some work and kind of, do a little dive into that lesson plan and develop some social skills and behavioral objectives that aligned with your lesson. So now we get to dive a little deeper, and that was the left side of this integrated lesson plan. Now we're going to talk about how we are going to incorporate those low intensity strategies and where in your lesson might you incorporate them. And so now remember, there are 7 of them. There are a lot of them. We're just going to dip our feet in all of them here. And they include active supervision, pre-correction, behavior-specific praise, one of my favorites, high probability requests, increased opportunities to respond, instructional feedback, and instructional choice. You'll find all of these editable resources in Module 7.2, embedding and integrating Ci3T domains into daily instruction. They're really easy to access, and maybe one of my colleagues can throw that into the chat where you can find that. All right, and so now a resource spotlight. So all of our work in comprehensive integrated 3-tiered models of prevention, it's all research-based. So this resource spotlight from What Works Clearinghouse is a practice guide, teacher-delivered behavioral interventions in grades K through 5. I love sharing this with my staff, and this little introduction right here document up here on your right, if you can see my cursor, that is a great 1 page. I know that one of my colleagues will drop the direct link for What Works Clearinghouse and this information, this research-based information. In the chat, but that was really important for me to share. It's a real easy way to share with your staff members or your colleagues. It's a 1 page, and then once they have the link, they can dive a little deeper into the research, see where it aligns in Tier 1 or Tier 2, but it's really, really helpful to align the work that we're doing, what we're creating in our integrated plans, our implementation manuals, and how it relates to and is research based. Okay. And of course, where are you going to find these low intensive strategies? So if you have your implementation manual, some of you may have that manual up. Where you're going to find that is in that Tier 1 information. So in your Tier 1 information, it's responsibilities of what you're going to do in your academic area and what are your responsibilities in behavior and social skills. Right under that area of academics, you're going to see those proactive, evidence-based strategies to support students, active engagement, and there are your 7 low-intensity strategies that you can use. So now I'm going to show you a video. This is an overview of embedding low intensity supports in daily instruction.
Embedding low-intensity supports in daily instruction. It's almost time for the reading block in Mrs. O's class. As she begins to transition her students to the carpet, she uses pre-correction to remind them of the Lincoln Lion expectations she wants to see.
Okay, class, as you're moving to the rug for reading time, remember to show respect by going right to your square and keeping your voice at a level 1.
As she sends students off to their designated areas, Miss O actively supervises the transition by moving throughout the room and keeping an eye out for students who are following the expectations so that she can acknowledge them with behavior-specific praise.
Timmy, thanks for walking right to the carpet and sitting down. Sarah, looking good sitting crisscross applesauce in your own square. Thank you.
As she starts the lesson, Miss O uses pre-correction again to let her students know what she is looking for as they work.
Alright, as we begin to learn our vocabulary words of the week, I'm looking for students to give their best effort answering the questions asked. Please remember to exercise self-control also by raising your hand if you need anything and keeping your hands and feet to yourself. Let's get started.
Throughout the lesson, Miss O uses opportunities to respond with her students by having them hold up response cards to the questions she asks. She also uses pre-correction and behavior-specific praise to help them use the cards as desired.
Alright students, let's review our vocabulary words. I'll ask you a question and you will use your response cards to show me your answer. Once the question is asked, be responsible by keeping your response card in front of you when you show your answer. Okay students, hold up your green card when you hear the correct definition of the word habitat. A habitat is what an animal eats, the name of a baby animal, the natural home of an animal or plant. Oh, I saw a lot of green cards on that last one. That's right, habitat is a word we can use to describe the place where an animal lives in nature. For example, the habitat of an alligator might be a swamp, river, or lake. Hannah, thanks for staying in your square and holding your response card right in front of you for that question.
Embedding low-intensity strategies into daily instruction helps Miss O prevent challenging behavior from occurring and support student engagement in the classroom.
All right, so you will also, I just wanted to make sure that I share with you, you can find that overview in that video in the module Tier 1, Practical Strategies for Preventing and Responding to Challenging Behaviors. I love that module too, and I'm always reminded of it because I know that there are two little learners on the front of the module, and they both are sticking their tongues out at each other, so I always can remember that module. So let's chat. Let's think about, we saw this overview. Let's chat a little bit about it. Let's think about which low intensity teacher delivered strategy do you use most often, and how is it built into your lessons or your daily routines? So think about that first. Which strategy? Pop that into the chat. Let's share. Pre-correction, behavior-specific praise. As I said, that is my favorite. Active supervision. I feel like we would do that 24/7 when we're in school. When you're doing classroom lessons, the active supervision is a big one. Yes. Behavior-specific praise, active supervision. Yeah. They're ones that kind of, you feel like they come naturally. You've practiced them. Direct reinforcement to students and also use vicarious reinforcement. Very nice. Such a habit. Yes, the more you do it, it just becomes natural. It becomes that habit. I would often share too each of the low intensity teacher delivered strategies with our staff, and we would divide them up and we would say, okay, we're all going to focus on one of these strategies each week, and we would change them up and we would really help and support one another so that we could hear that language throughout our school environment. Okay, so let's move on to the second one. How is it built into your lessons or your daily routines? Let's share some examples of that in the chat. Pair pre-correction with any transitions. Absolutely. Very important, building it into transitions. Behavior-specific praise included in feedback I'm providing to students. Set a target number of praise and inform the student beforehand. I love that. So let's move on. And in our next slide, let's talk about an example, an elementary illustration, and opportunities to incorporate low intensity strategies. So you had an opportunity in the last work session to think about objectives, social skills objectives, and behavioral expectations objectives. So here's an example of a lesson overview. The teacher models solving addition problems with regrouping using base 10 blocks, always fun, as Elise shared, and students then work in pairs to solve problems, first with manipulatives and then on paper. So your objective academically, students from your primary resource, students will be able to use base 10 blocks to model and solve two-digit addition problems with regrouping. And then your social skills objective, maybe you had just had a lesson and you want to reinforce a recent social skill that you taught. So you want to share materials and using kind words when working with peers. And that might be something that you're really wanting to reinforce from that lesson. Behavioral expectations, again, this is from your routine behavior expectations in your implementation plan. So perhaps it might sound like this, or it is this. Try your best, use math tools responsibly, put supplies back where they belong, and listen when a teacher or classmate is talking. Those are great examples at the elementary level. So now let's talk about the opportunities to incorporate our low intensity strategies. Again, we're starting with my favorite, behavior-specific praise, and that might sound like something like this. Elise, great job for setting up your base 10 blocks on the mat. I can see you're ready to begin the lesson. And then we can have, here's an example of pre-correction. Remember, when we're done, we want to take those base 10 blocks and go and put them back in their bag. Active supervision, you might want to be making sure that you're up and you're about during cleanup time. And this is something that I would definitely hear during active supervision. You might have some behavior-specific praise going on. You might have some pre-correction going on during that time. So it's not unlikely that you would hear that. And then, of course, instructional choice. Choosing a partner for one of the learners to work with. They might want to choose their own partner, choosing 3 equations to solve out of a group of ones. And then also, they might want to be able to choose where they want to sit. Sometimes in a classroom, you have a little comfy corner that kids can do their work in. They might choose to sit on the carpet or just stay at their desk by themselves. So there's some great examples of elementary opportunities to incorporate low intensity strategies. All right. Now, module connection. I love the module connections because I think the resources are incredibly helpful and they're at your fingertips. So when you access the low intensity strategy instructional choice module right here, you're going to see a lot of resources. I like to go to the overview section in the module, and you will see in that section, you have all of your editable resources. You can click on a page to go right to the resource, or you can click on the link and be able to download it to use it. Here we have some opportunities to identify. There's some infographics here that show us what instructional choice is. Here's some very specific examples of what instructional choice is and what it might look like. Don't forget, in your implementation plans, you have all of your stakeholders, including your parents, your community partners. You want to make sure that you share this information at home. So there's certainly a choice at home guideline. There are guidelines for parents there. There's an overview video, a step-by-step guide for families. Great to share this link with families. And then, of course, for classroom teachers, there's even an editable resource that allows them to provide an activity menu. And that's really, really helpful. There's 2 examples in there. One is for the classroom teacher, one is for the physical education teacher. They're both helpful, and you can certainly edit them so that they work for whomever the teacher is, or the special area. And of course, don't forget treatment integrity. This is a treatment integrity checklist. And of course, we want to make sure that we know the degree to which practices are in place and plan. So it's a great checklist to support educators as they implement this low intensity strategies, such as instructional choice. All right. Now let's move on. And please, right now we're in our Empower Session 3. Really consider joining us for Empower Session 4, Mastering Behavior Specific Praise and Pre-Correction. That one is going to be on January 21st. That is a Wednesday, so taking a deeper dive into that is going to be great. So we want to dive a little bit deeper into pre-correction here. All right, so pre-correction, the low intensity strategy. Pre-corrections are reminders of desired behaviors to a student prior to a problem occurring, and pre-corrections can be used at any level. It can be used as an academic reminder. It can be used as a behavioral reminder, as well as a social emotional reminder. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into them, but here are some great examples for academic reminders. When reading an unfamiliar word, remember to point to the first letter and say its sound. A nice example of a behavioral reminder. Sonia, we are about to all go sit in our carpet spots. So remember to walk, keep your hands and feet to yourself, showing responsibility. And another example of our social emotional reminders are just a reminder to listen carefully at opposing arguments as we prepare for a mock trial. That might be a nice secondary social emotional reminder. All right. So speaking of secondary illustrations, we had an opportunity to look at the elementary level. And so now we have an opportunity to really kind of dive in and, look at what the secondary illustration opportunities to incorporate pre-correction are. So here's an example of a lesson overview. After reading a short story in the class, students work in pairs to brainstorm possible themes and evidence. The class then holds structured discussion where students practice connecting ideas and supporting claims with text. So again, at that tier 1 level, you have an academic objective, a social skills objective, and a behavioral expectation, all from your primary resource, both in all three in these areas, and especially at the behavioral expectations, that's your routine setting rubric. So in the academic objective, students will be able to identify the theme of a short story and cite 2 pieces of textual evidence to support their claim. The social skills objective, perhaps you're going to build on a peer's commitment by paraphrasing or connecting their own idea to what was said. And behaviorally, arrive to class prepared. How about charge that device, make sure you have your book, and remain on task. So those are great examples. All right. And then, of course, pre-correction, opportunities to incorporate pre-correction at that secondary level. Here's some examples. Before we begin, who can remind me of our partner work expectations? Reviewing that prior to. If you want to connect to what someone else said, you might say, building on that idea, I think also. So that's another way. And remember, if you'd like to share, raise your hand, wait to be called on, one of those behavioral expectations. And then last but not least, different people might see different themes in a story. That's okay. We can learn from each other. If you disagree, you might say something like, I see it a little differently because. So that real nice social skills connection with incorporating pre-correction as our low intensity strategy. All right, let's move on and let's chat. So let's pull up the social skills objective and behavioral expectation you worked on in the last team time. And think about that, and let's write one pre-correction statement you could maybe use in that lesson. So I'm going to give you a little time to pull that up, and then once you have that up, pop in the chat what might be some of your ideas. Remember, when you enter the classroom to ask for work, we need to do it quietly. Remember to raise your hand, being aware of your peers around you. Remembering to listen, show respect for the ideas of others. Yes. Remember, we're working in groups. We're listening to everyone's thoughts using kind words. These are great examples. Absolutely. Remember, if you start to feel strong emotions about what someone is saying, use a feel better strategy. I love that. Awesome. Those are great, great examples. Thank you so much for doing that. So in our next session, we're going to have a work opportunity, work time for about 20 minutes. You're going to get to choose which breakout room you would like to go in. It's behavior-specific praise, instructional choice, or opportunities to respond.
It's so great to hear the great things that you're doing and thinking about things that are working well for you and then taking little nuggets from other people to do that. And many of the districts that we've gotten to work with through the years, like literally for the last 25 years, this is what resonates with people. Very, very practical, putting those in the hands of people. And a frequently asked question from people is, but how do I do this while I'm teaching? So that tool for tonight, that using that integrated lesson plan, I hope it served as a really good illustration for you to think about. Now that might be something that you put back out in front of people to say, you know, classrooms that are functioning really well, put it all together. And so letting them know it doesn't have to be, I stopped to do the pre-correct thing, or I'm going to stop this part of instruction, but just really helping people to see those ways that it literally gets threaded throughout the fabric of daily instruction. Also, I think it's really, really cool to watch people that are in non-instructional areas also using that. So like when there is a challenge, and right now we were just talking about in one of the groups that December usually sees a spike in office discipline referrals and March does. So knowing that, getting in front of it, like you can do things like right now, like reteaching setting expectations and then giving kids practice opportunities to put that out to remind them of what's expected before the wheels fall off the bus, so to speak. So thank you guys very much for engaging in your breakout rooms to look at these three. And I know many of you are doing your own presentations and sharing in different ways. And variety, I do think, is the key to keeping it fresh. And I love what you had said too about we don't want it just to be go find something to do, but putting some guardrails around it to say, like, in our building, we're focusing on these three. Pick one to start with, or giving people the challenge. And I hope that when you had a chance to work in that first breakout room, even that idea about giving people some opportunity to practice writing in those objectives. Like people are getting really good at teaching the lessons, but helping them to bring in reminders for expected behavior and bring in reminders about how they're supposed to use all those skills that are along the way. So if you are leaving tonight and you're thinking, gosh, I heard some really good ideas and I want to remember those, I think it's especially important to write it down tonight. Many of you, this will be a long week because you're getting ready to head into the Thanksgiving week. You can go back and use some of this literally tomorrow in your classrooms, and you can also have a plan for moving it forward when you come back. So like if you liked this idea about how they pop into a newsletter or to like a little, tip for success in a faculty meeting, you might jot that down and say, I want to share this idea out in my school or in my district or in my geographic region. And if you're open to it, really thinking about how could you build others' capacity to gain confidence, like knowledge, confidence, and really understanding the utility of using these strategies. Doesn't have to be anything big and complicated, but knowing how to do it well is really important. And I will say there are times when we gloss over the steps and we miss certain things. I remember many, many years ago, my son actually turns 30 in January and my daughter is 26. But flashback many, many years ago, we used to do this thing when my kids lived at home where we used to rotate who got to pick eating out. So it used to be every month it went from youngest to oldest. So the youngest kid got to pick the first Saturday, then it was the next person, and thank God Craig's oldest, so he was always last. That's my husband. So one time we were in Chicago, which is where my husband is from, and we were out walking around, and I can usually count on Nathan to pick things that I really like to eat. Like we always like sushi and salad bars, and Katie and Craig were like meat and three, that kind of, thing. So there we are in Chicago, and I'm like, hey, bud, it's your turn to choose. Like, what do you want to do? There's this really great salad bar at this place. There's a sushi place over here, or there's Gino's Pizza. And I should let you know that I'm not a big fan of bread or cheese. And so Nathan, surprisingly, he's like, oh, let's try Gino's Pizza. And I looked at him, I'm like, well, we could do that. Or you remember the ice cream, there's that ice cream, the soft serve thing at the salad bar. Remember the sushi? They have all those roll-ups. He's like, yeah, but I'd like to try the pizza. And I'm like, but do you remember they have the soft baked cookies at the salad? So finally he turns around and he's like, Mom, is this one of those times where we really have a choice? Or is this one of those times where we're supposed to pick your choice? And it was such a good reminder to me. So I always refer to that as the Gino's Pizza choice. And to this day, when I'm trying to get them to do something, he will still turn around and say, is this a Gino's Pizza choice? And for the record, we did eat there. I ate it, and it was actually very tasty. But I say this because we want to be careful to keep track of the pitfalls of small shifts in these strategies that can really change how well they work. It does not work to give instructional choice when you actually are forcing them into your choice. So what I did that day was a wonderful non-example. Don't do that. I remember we're teaching with somebody, and she was a kindergarten teacher, and I was at the time a fifth grade teacher, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm just dreading today because, I bet a lot of kids will pick paint. And I'm like, what do you mean pick paint? She's like, well, today's free choice center, and I just hate the painting one, so I hope no kids pick it. And I'm like, you don't have to offer the painting station. She's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you're in charge. You get the paycheck, you drive here, and they're in kindergarten. So if it's not a choice you want to offer, don't offer it. You can meet the instructional objectives in ways that make sense. So as you're reading these things, look for the nuances, and even things like saying something when a kid makes a choice, avoid saying something like, ooh, I knew you'd pick that one. Because unintentionally, what you will do is you will teach kids to try to guess what you want them to get. And instead, the whole point is to develop their agency. And I use those illustrations with choice. Every strategy has these little tips when you get into the module about what to look out for. So if you decide that you would like to come back and join us again, the next time we will be working on 2 specific strategies about behavior-specific praise and pre-correction. We're going to walk through each of the steps. So it'll be basically 2 1-hour blocks. You're going to come, you're going to learn how to do it, you're going to learn tips, and you're going to use areas for tips and pitfalls, I think is what we call them. So you want to check that out. I also want to say we've had so many people that have been joining us for these drop-in times for coaching calls. And so we encourage you, if you have done something well, I love what you shared. If you wanted to even pop into one of those to share what you're doing that's working, by all means, come. We'd love to share your success. So a very special shout out tonight. Thank you to Elise Saracen and to Stacy and all the people that were here to coach and support you. It is, as I always say, I think time is the most precious gift that we can give each other. And as we head into the Thanksgiving break, if you celebrate that holiday, I hope you know that I am deeply thankful for the time and effort that you put into being here tonight. So thank you so much. And if you would, there's an evaluation that